that time, I consider the years I spent on I Love Lucy to be perhaps the biggest rip-off of my career.
I consider it the biggest rip-off of my career. The bitter feud behind I Love Lucy Vivian Vance versus William Frawley, Hollywood's hidden war. They made America laugh for 6 seasons. As Fred and Ethel Mertz, the lovable neighbors on I Love Lucy, William Frawley, and Vivian Vance became one of television's most iconic duos. But behind the perfectly timed one-liners and endearing squabbles was a truth that fans never saw coming, a deep, simmering hatred that made its way from backstage to Hollywood legend. Vivian Vance once described her years on I Love Lucy as perhaps the biggest rip-off of my career. And when you uncover what happened behind the scenes, her frustration makes sense. The set of I Love Lucy in 1951 was a place of both creative magic and professional turbulence. Lucille Ball, sharp as ever and determined to break new ground, was assembling a cast for a sitcom that, at the time, no one could have predicted would change television forever. Her first pick for the role of Ethel Mertz wasn't Vance at all. It was Bea Benaderet, a talented character actress with the comedic chops to go toe-to-toe with Lucy. But Benaderet was already tied to the George Burns and Gracie Allen show. Scheduling conflicts forced Lucy to pivot. Next, she considered her good friend Mary Wickes, who turned the offer down, not because she didn't want it, but because she valued her friendship with Ball too much to risk complicating it with business. Meanwhile, Desi Arnaz, Lucy's real-life husband and executive producer, was deep in the trenches, juggling scripts, network notes, and casting decisions. Then came the Fred Mertz dilemma. At one point, Lucy lobbied for veteran actor James Gleason, fresh off their film Miss Grant Takes Richmond, but Gleason's $3,500 per episode salary demand scared the studio off. That left the role wide open, until William Frawley made a bold move. Frawley, a vaudeville veteran with over 100 films under his belt, didn't wait for an invitation. He called Lucy personally, asking for the role. CBS wasn't thrilled. Frawley had a well-earned reputation for heavy drinking and erratic behavior. But Desi Arnaz stood firm, reportedly telling network execs that Frawley was the only man for the job. Arnaz imposed a single, non-negotiable condition. If Frawley ever showed up to set drunk, he'd be fired on the spot. Frawley agreed. He wanted the role that badly, but no amount of experience or professionalism could prepare the cast or the audience for what was about to unfold between Frawley and Vance. A partnership built on pretend and nothing more when production began, the dynamic between Fred and Ethel Mertz seemed effortless. But that on-screen chemistry masked a behind-the-scenes storm. Vivian Vance, then 42, was beautiful, vibrant, and still at the peak of her career. Frawley was 64, grizzled, cantankerous, and visibly older. To Vance, the casting was an insult. She reportedly said, "How could anyone believe I'm married to that old man?" The age difference wasn't just 22 years, it was a canyon. She felt miscast, overlooked, and undermined. And as filming progressed, what began as quiet discomfort turned into full-blown contempt. Frawley didn't take kindly to Vance's complaints either. He viewed her disdain as arrogance and took every opportunity to needle her in return. What could have been a simple generational disconnect spiraled into one of the most infamous feuds in classic television history. They were cordial, barely. They learned to hit their marks and deliver the laughs. But once the cameras stopped rolling, they avoided each other like the plague. Frawley reportedly refused to even sit with Vance in the commissary. She, in turn, once told a friend she'd rather eat nails than socialize with him after hours. Even CBS executives saw the writing on the wall. Years later, when a potential Fred and Ethel spin-off was floated, Vance declined without hesitation. "I could never stomach working with that man again," she said. Beneath the laughter, the pain of image and injustice. Part of the tension stemmed from something deeper than personality clashes. For Vance, the role of Ethel Mertz boxed her into a character she felt was beneath her abilities and far removed from her true self. On screen, Ethel was frumpy, nagging, and motherly. Off-screen, Vance was glamorous, witty, and used to leading lady roles on stage. The disconnect wore her down. Add to that the perceived insult of being paired with an older, irritable man as her TV husband, and it was a recipe for resentment. Frawley, on the other hand, saw the role as a second act, an unexpected career revival. He was grateful, even thrilled, and he despised what he saw as Vance's ingratitude. Their perspectives were wildly misaligned, and neither ever made a move toward reconciliation. The feud that outlived the fame. By the time I Love Lucy ended in 1957, their feud had become an open secret in the industry. Colleagues whispered about it, audiences speculated, but neither Frawley nor Vance ever spoke publicly in great detail. What couldn't be denied was the professional brilliance they achieved, even while personally loathing each other. Frawley died in 1966, never having mended the rift. When someone informed Vance of his passing, her response was reportedly, "Champagne, anyone?" It was brutal, it was honest, and it was pure Vivian. A legacy with layers I love. Lucy remains one of television's most groundbreaking shows, and Fred and Ethel are still considered one of TV's most iconic comedy duos. But their story reminds us of an enduring truth in entertainment. What we see on camera is only part of the picture. Behind the scenes, stars like Vivian Vance were grappling with typecasting, image politics, and deep personal frustration. She made millions laugh while struggling not to cry. William Frawley, for all his gruff exterior, brought impeccable timing and presence even as he fought his own demons. Together, they made TV history, but they paid a price for it. The cost of chemistry, Vivian Vance, William Frawley, and the pain behind the punchlines. "Nobody will believe I'm married to that old goat." That wasn't a punchline from a script. It was a line Vivian Vance said out loud during rehearsal. And William Frawley, the man cast as her on-screen husband, heard every word. The tension after that? Palpable and permanent. Can you blame her? Vivian was 42, smart, sharp, and in the prime of her career. She had stage experience, comic timing, and a magnetic screen presence. And yet there she was, cast opposite a 64-year-old vaudevillian who looked more like someone's great uncle than a husband. Meanwhile, her co-star and close friend Lucille Ball was getting the glamour. Flirty dresses, fun scripts, and a gorgeous on-screen marriage to the young and handsome Desi Arnaz. The contrast was cruel. Producers didn't help. In fact, they made it worse. They deliberately frumped up Vivian's appearance, aging her with unflattering makeup, dowdy wardrobe, and lighting choices that drained her vitality. While Lucy sparkled, Ethel was dulled down, reduced to the role of the nagging second-fiddle wife. It wasn't just a creative decision, it was a career-defining one, and for Vivian Vance, it felt like punishment. Because the truth is, Vivian and Lucy were actually close in age. In another world, she could have been cast as a leading lady. Instead, she found herself playing second banana to a man over 2 decades older, and resenting every minute of it. The marriage that wasn't, a charade on screen, a Cold War off-screen. To viewers, Fred and Ethel Mertz were sitcom gold. Their bickering felt real, their banter electric. But that was no Hollywood magic. That was contempt, barely disguised. Vivian couldn't bring herself to show physical affection toward Frawley. Kissing him? Out of the question. She became a master of the air kiss, camera angles and body language doing the work of intimacy she refused to perform. Watch the episode Equal Rights. There's a scene where Fred and Ethel are locked in a jail cell. supposed to share a kiss. What you get instead is stiff body language, an awkward beat of silence, and an eye roll from Vance that practically says, "I can't believe I have to do this again." And Frawley? He didn't take the insult lying down. He pushed back, in his own passive-aggressive way. He reportedly lobbied the writers to insert cruel jabs into the script, lines mocking Ethel's figure, her looks, her age, one of the most infamous, when Fred refers to Ethel's body as a sack full of doorknobs. Brutal, petty, and undeniably effective. The twisted irony is this: that very tension, the seething animosity, made their scenes crackle with realism. The audience bought every snarky line, every eye roll, every marital spat, because behind the camera, the actors actually meant it. What played as brilliant chemistry was, in truth, pure emotional warfare. When the cameras stopped, the damage remained. The longer the show went on, the deeper the wound became. Vivian wasn't just playing Ethel, she was being buried by her. The character, with all her plainness and passivity, clung to Vivian long after the final wrap. No matter what she auditioned for, no matter how hard she tried to pivot her career, she was still Ethel Mertz, still the older man's nagging wife, still the comic relief. It was more than frustration, it was erasure. When CBS floated the idea of a Fred and Ethel spin-off, complete with a $50,000 bonus attached, Vivian Vance didn't hesitate. She said no, firmly. Not even Lucille Ball or Desi Arnaz could talk her into it. "I can't spend another day working with Frawley," she said, "not without Lucy and Desi there to buffer it." Imagine turning down a fortune in the 1950s. Not for another role, not for another opportunity, but because the thought of sharing a set with your co-star made your skin crawl. That speaks volumes. The price of laughter. In the end, what we saw on I Love Lucy was brilliant television. Hilarious, heartwarming, historic. But behind that brilliance was a woman who sacrificed a piece of herself for the role. A woman whose self-esteem was quietly chipped away by ageism, typecasting, and studio politics. And a man whose bitterness became his armor, whose revenge came in the form of scripted cruelty. The 22-year age gap wasn't just a number, it was a metaphor for missed opportunity, professional inequality, and the emotional toll of being forced into a role that didn't reflect who you were or what you were capable of. Yes, Fred and Ethel were iconic, but at what cost? Vivian Vance carried that burden for the rest of her life. And William Frawley? He died without ever reconciling with the woman who helped make him a household name. It's a story of success tainted by sacrifice, of comedy rooted in conflict, and of how Hollywood can make us laugh while breaking the people who bring us those laughs. Tell us, has learning the truth behind Fred and Ethel changed the way you see I Love Lucy? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more untold stories behind TV's golden age. Because sometimes the biggest drama isn't in the script. It's what the script is trying to hide. They were TV's most beloved bickering couple. But off camera, it was all-out war. Fred and Ethel Mertz might have made audiences laugh every week on I Love Lucy, but their real-life counterparts, Vivian Vance and William Frawley, were locked in one of the coldest, most notorious feuds in early television history. And by the end, there was no reconciliation, no warm reunion, no sitcom-style wrap-up, just resentment and a hard no when opportunity came knocking. After I Love Lucy wrapped its original run in 1957, CBS had a bold idea, a spin-off, a brand new show focused entirely on Fred and Ethel Mertz. They even dangled a hefty bonus check in front of the two stars. For the network, it was a no-brainer. The characters were beloved, the chemistry electric, at least on screen. But the network had underestimated just how deep the animosity ran behind the scenes. William Frawley was all in. Of course he was. He saw the dollar signs, the renewed fame, the chance to stay relevant in a rapidly evolving industry. "Sure, let's do it," he reportedly said, ready to reprise his role as the cranky, penny-pinching Fred. But Vivian Vance? Not a chance. She shut it down immediately. Politely? Number firmly? Absolutely. She didn't want more money. She didn't want more exposure. She just wanted out. Away from Frawley, away from Ethel, away from everything that reminded her of what that job had cost her emotionally. In fact, she only agreed to join the Lucy Desi Comedy Hour, the show's follow-up, on the condition that her appearances alongside Frawley would be extremely limited, and Lucy, ever loyal, made sure to protect her friend. No room for closure. Frawley, for his part, never forgave her. The bitterness only hardened with time. According to those close to him, he often hurled insults at the mere mention of her name. And Vance? She carried the emotional toll of "I Love Lucy" like an unwanted scar. They never made peace. When Frawley passed away in 1966, someone asked Vance for a comment. Her alleged response? "Champagne, anyone?" Brutal, blunt, but deeply telling. It wasn't just sarcasm. It was the exhale of a woman finally free from a professional relationship that had been, for her, toxic to the core. The legacy of a feud. Looking back now, it's easy to see why the Fred and Ethel scenes were so good. The jabs, the tension, the micro-expressions of disdain masked as sitcom banter. It wasn't acting, it was truth. Two people trapped in a fictional marriage, performing for millions, while quietly hating every minute of each other's company. And yet, against all odds, it worked. Their scenes were unforgettable, their timing was impeccable, and their real-life friction added an undeniable fire to every interaction. TV historians today suggest that the unresolved tension between Vance and Frawley may have enhanced the show's realism, that the coldness, the occasional bite behind the laughter, gave I Love Lucy a layer of authenticity rarely seen in 1950s television. But that truth came at a cost. Vivian Vance never truly escaped Ethel. Typecast for years, she struggled to rebrand herself in Hollywood's limited landscape for women over 40. And William Frawley, despite his acclaim, spent his final years remembered as much for his cantankerous personality as for his contribution to one of TV's greatest comedies. Comedy born from conflict. The story of Fred and Ethel is more than sitcom trivia. It's a cautionary tale about how entertainment often masks pain, about how success can be forged in fire, and about how some wounds, no matter how professionally hidden, never truly heal. But still, they made history. Vivian Vance and William Frawley, in all their dysfunction and disdain, gave us something real, something raw, and something unforgettable. So the next time you watch I Love Lucy, and you see Fred and Ethel Mertz bickering over rent money or squabbling in the kitchen, just remember, you're not watching actors pretending to argue. You're watching two performers doing the best work of their lives while living through one of the worst relationships of their careers. And somehow, that pain became comedy gold. What do you think? Should they have worked it out? Or was Vivian right to walk away? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more untold Hollywood stories. Because sometimes, the best TV was born from the real-life drama nobody dared to talk about until now. The spin-off that never was, and the fallout that never healed. To William Frawley, Vivian Vance's refusal wasn't just a professional disappointment. It was personal, deeply personal. He saw her no as sabotage, a betrayal not just of him, but of everything they had built together on I Love Lucy. After all, despite the tension, they had created something iconic, something beloved. And now, when the spotlight was finally shifting their way, she shut the door. Hard. Sources close to the production say Frawley never forgave her. He reportedly told colleagues, "She killed the only shot we had." The bitterness festered. For the rest of his life, He spoke of Vance with the same venom he'd always reserved for Hollywood critics and studio heads who crossed him. Except this time, it wasn't business. It was personal, and it cut deep. From Vivian Vance's perspective, however, it was a matter of dignity and direction. She wasn't just walking away from a paycheck, she was walking away from a dynamic that had left her feeling creatively stifled and emotionally drained. She knew what that spin-off would be. 6 more years of playing a frumpy, underappreciated wife to a man she could barely stand. No Lucy, no Ricky, no laughter between takes. Just her and Frawley, week after week, locked in a sitcom that she believed had no heart without the whole ensemble. And she wasn't wrong. Vance's instincts, though unpopular with studio execs, were grounded in truth. The magic of I Love Lucy wasn't just in the Mertzes, it was in the alchemy of the four. Lucy's unhinged brilliance, Ricky's charismatic straight man act, and Fred and Ethel's grounded, often hilarious contrast. Without the full quartet, something vital was lost. But even more than that, Vivian Vance was done being typecast. She had tasted success, yes, but always with limitations, always with caveats, always the sidekick, the support, the funny friend. And after 6 seasons of shouldering the emotional labor of her role, she craved more than just survival. She wanted reinvention, respect, and maybe finally, some peace. A career redefined, and a reputation reclaimed. In the years that followed, Vance continued to appear with Lucille Ball in several of her later shows, including The Lucy Show, where their chemistry, absent the tension of the Mertz marriage, flourished. Their real-life friendship remained one of the few bright spots in Vance's post-Lucy career, and Lucy never forgot how much she owed her. Vivian made I Love Lucy work, Lucille once said. There was no show without Ethel. And yet, the shadow of Ethel Mertz followed Vance for the rest of her life. She battled depression, fought against the industry's brutal ageism, and worked tirelessly to be seen not just as Lucy's friend, but as an actress in her own right. She never quite shook the typecasting, but she did earn something far more meaningful in the eyes of critics and fans: respect. As for Frawley, he went on to a recurring role in My Three Sons, but passed away in 1966. And though his contribution to television was significant, the industry never forgot the tension he left behind. He died a Hollywood legend, but also a cautionary tale about the price of bitterness. 2 legends, 1 legacy, and a feud that still echoes. The story of Fred and Ethel Mertz is a study in contradiction. On screen, they were a comedic match made in heaven. Off screen, they were 2 actors trapped in a dynamic neither wanted, trying to endure it for the sake of something bigger than themselves, the show. And that's the bittersweet magic of I Love Lucy. The show was a groundbreaking triumph, and the characters were unforgettable. But beneath the laughter was real pain, real conflict, real sacrifice, and yet, they showed up. They delivered. They made history. So the next time you watch Fred roll his eyes at Ethel, or Ethel throw a biting retort right back at him, know this: those weren't just lines. They were fragments of a complicated, combative relationship. One that somehow birthed one of television's most enduring comedic duos. That's the paradox of performance. Sometimes the best art comes from the hardest places. Champagne for everybody. The coldest goodbye in classic TV history. It's March 3, 1966. News breaks. William Frawley, the man who played Fred Mertz on I Love Lucy, has died of a heart attack at age 79. The headlines are respectful. Hollywood murmurs its usual condolences. But behind the quiet tribute lies a storm that's been brewing for over a decade, and it's about to erupt. Vivian Vance, the woman who played Ethel Mertz, his on-screen wife and off-screen nemesis, hears the news while dining at a restaurant, and in that moment, she doesn't pause. She doesn't offer a solemn nod or whisper a polite, "Oh dear." Instead, she clinks her glass and declares, "Champagne for everybody." 5 words. That's all it took. The room fell silent. Then the shock settled in. Then the legend was born. Bitterness. That time couldn't touch. It wasn't just a reaction. It was a release. A lifetime of resentment finally bubbling to the surface. That champagne wasn't a toast. It was a full stop, a mic drop. A public declaration that the war was over, not because peace had been made, but because the battlefield had finally emptied. And before anyone casts judgment on Vance, consider this. This wasn't about one bad day or a few snarky remarks. This was 15 years of tension, 15 years of being forced to smile through gritted teeth, 15 years of enduring slurred insults, off-script jabs, and the exhausting presence of a man who, by most accounts, didn't just rub her the wrong way. He scraped raw. Frawley was notoriously difficult. He drank, he cursed, he held grudges like fine china, and according to multiple biographers, he saved some of his harshest vitriol for Vance, once even using the C word in a public interview to describe her. And still, she showed up. She delivered. And she helped build one of the most enduring comedies of all time. But when that era finally ended, what stayed with her wasn't the laughs. It was the wear and tear. The toast heard round Hollywood. By the time of his death, I Love Lucy had been off the air nearly a decade. You'd think the sting might have softened. You'd think that maybe, just maybe, time would have dulled the edge. But not for Vivian Vance. His name still brought heat to her face. The memories weren't nostalgic, they were radioactive. And her reaction, so immediate, so unapologetically raw, told the world everything it needed to know. She never got closure, never found common ground. There was no reconciliation, no mellowing with age. Just a glass, a toast, and decades of pain uncorked in one unforgettable moment. It wasn't cruel, it was honest. The performance that masked a war. What's perhaps most remarkable is that despite their mutual contempt, Fred and Ethel Mertz worked. They clicked. The bickering was legendary, the chemistry undeniable. Their on-screen fights made people howl with laughter, and behind that magic was real-life disdain burning just beneath the surface. And that's the paradox of I Love Lucy, a show so rooted in warmth, joy, and friendship that masked one of the coldest rivalries in sitcom history. Every time Fred called Ethel a nag, every time she rolled her eyes and snapped back, it wasn't just performance. It was personal. And yet those scenes endure, because somehow, through all the bitterness, they created something timeless. The final word. Champagne and closure. Vivian Vance's now infamous champagne toast wasn't just an act of pettiness. It was, in truth, a release, a long overdue exhale after years of professional tension, emotional suppression, and personal frustration. That single gesture, loud and unapologetic, served as the final punctuation on a chapter she had been forced to revisit for far too long. For Vance, the toast wasn't about celebrating a man's death. It was about reclaiming her narrative. It was about liberation from a role that boxed her into the thankless archetype of the frumpy housewife, from being endlessly cast as the comic relief while others got the spotlight, from the emotional toll of working day after day alongside a man who, by many accounts, made her life on set nearly unbearable. And most of all, it was freedom from Ethel Mertz, a character who followed her long after the show ended. A role that, while beloved by millions, had come to symbolize everything she resented: limitation, typecasting, invisibility. When Vance clinked her glass and declared champagne for everybody, she wasn't toasting William Frawley's death. She was letting go of the emotional weight she had carried silently for over a decade. That glass wasn't raised in cruelty. It was raised in closure. In that single moment, unfiltered and unforgettable, she gave Hollywood something rare, an honest goodbye. Not polished, not packaged for PR, just real. raw, human. And here we are all these years later, still captivated by Fred and Ethel, still quoting their jabs, still laughing at their timeless sitcom antics. But now, we understand the full story. Behind the black and white charm was a bitter truth. One of the most emotionally charged feuds in classic television. A dynamic so fractured, it shaped both their careers and their legacies. So the next time you hear Ethel sass Fred on I Love Lucy, remember, the comedy was brilliant, but the pain behind it was real. Thanks for watching. If this story revealed the truth behind the smile, drop a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. And for more untold truths from Hollywood's golden age, click on the next video because the stories you thought you knew, they're only the beginning.